Femme Fatale. Sexy, murderous, and manipulative sirens of cinema. This trope is a quintessential part of the noir genre of the 1940s and early 1950s. In a breakdown of this archetype, we'll be taking a close-up look at some femme fatales throughout film noir, and dissecting how their actions and facial expressions in these scenes symbolize the moral depravity and male disillusionment that serve as vital elements in creating this archetype. However, first, we must take a look at how exactly media representations of women went from this to this. Film noir, with its Venetian blinds and morally gray anti-heroes, was a genre succeeding World War II, reflecting the disposition of a disillusioned nation. Soldiers were returning home from war, having seen enough horror and violence to last a lifetime, and while they were overseas, the rest of the nation experienced a cultural upheaval. Women were forced to work in order to support the war effort, and these soldiers were returning to a society where the women in their lives were experiencing an independence like never before. This struck fear into people. Soldiers feared their wives' infidelity while they were overseas, men feared their displacement in the workforce, and most of all, a patriarchal society feared women's sudden expression of agency over their own lives. Thus, the femme fatale was born, an on-screen representation of a post-war nation's anxieties. Domineering, promiscuous, and immoral, these fatal women earn their name from the destruction that they bring into the lives of the men who become entangled with them, the men they sexually lure and criminally manipulate in order to get what they want. Take Phyllis Dietrichson from the 1944 film Double Indemnity, for example. She pulls in anti-hero Walter Neff with her beauty and allure and manipulates him into killing her husband for the insurance money. In this scene, we get a close-up of Phyllis's face as her husband is strangled to death, and there's no horror or remorse in her gaze as the man dies in the seat next to her. She's completely cold in the eyes, and her expression conveys a disturbing sense of pleasure within her, thus showcasing the archetypal depravity that exists within the femme fatale. She's effectively killed two men, one through murder and the other through irredeemable criminal action that was fueled by sexual desire that ultimately ends in his downfall, symbolic of the downfall of male power as women were gaining agency in a post-war society. And her death, symbolic of the post-war cultural shift that took place regarding womanhood and the quote-unquote death of female submission that manifested itself through the immorality of the femme fatale, only to be revealed after her fatality has a male protagonist in her grasp. This same pleasure is seen in the expression of Claire from the 1949 film Tension. As her husband and boyfriend fight over her in the sand, Claire, the antithesis of the good girl next door trope, is infatuated with the power that she holds over these men. They're willing to fight over her, they're reduced to animalistic urges because of her, and the power that this gives Claire is evidently arousing to her. This both represents the demonization of female power and sexuality, as in this scene they both manifest themselves in socially unacceptable ways. Moving to a less subtle depiction of the femme fatale's moral depravity displayed through her facial expressions, we have Annie from the 1950 film Gone Crazy. In a moment of rare authenticity and vulnerability, just like Phyllis at the end of Double Indemnity.
No, I never loved you, Walter, not you or anybody else. I'm rotten to the heart. I used you just as you said. That's all you ever meant to me.
Or even Mademoiselle Zena from Edmund Golding's Nightmare Alley.
I did everything I could to make it up to him, but you see how it is. The more I try, the worse he gets. But I'm not going to give up on him. It's the least I can do.
Annie admits her own fallibility.
But I've never been much good. At least up to now I haven't. You aren't getting any bargain.
She makes no illusions that she's criminally inclined and destructive towards men in her life. We then see this innate, intense immorality actualized when she convinces her husband to rob a bank with her so that they can afford an expensive lifestyle without working for it. She looks back at the camera as the police chase the couple with an almost animalistic look in her eyes. Again, we see the actions of the femme fatale leading the men in their life into a dark world of criminality, and in this shot of her utterly unhinged expression, a clear depiction of the moral perversion that characterizes the femme fatale. Cora's character from Tay Garnett's The Postman Always Rings Twice is another stark example of the villainizing of female agency and power through the sexual and immoral acts of the femme fatale. Cora, wishing to own her husband's restaurant, convinces her lover Frank to kill him. In this shot, we see an archetypal depiction of the femme fatale's skills of persuasion. Her facial expressions read as seductive while still making her seem vulnerable, emotionally manipulating the man before her into helping her get what she wants. Then she seals the deal with a declaration of love.
That's why you've got to help me. It's because I do love you.
Fed up with female acquiescence, these women hold dominance over their lives and the people in them, and their arousal in these scenes over this power makes them actualized representations of America's demonization of women with agency, as traditional female domesticity was dissipating due to the social climate of post-war America, dismantling traditional gender roles in the process by placing them on top, and literally in the driver's seat. Disillusionment is another defining factor of this archetype. The femme fatale dismantles conventional womanhood of the time, and her character is marked by the mask of beauty and sexuality that she puts up to hide her true intentions, disillusioning the male protagonist once the mask is removed. This characteristic of the femme fatale is symbolic in cinema for returning soldiers' feelings of disenchantment when they return from war to find the women in their lives suddenly independent, economically and socially, and this inspired fear and mistrust of their new roles in society. This male disillusionment with what they thought to be the idealized version of a woman is best represented in Fritz Lang's The Woman in the Window. Here we see a focus shot of a painting of a woman, and our noir anti-hero admiring it for its beauty, symbolic of the romanticized front the femme fatale shows to the world in order to lure men in with. Then the audience sees the actual woman from the painting's face reflected in the glass, symbolic of the reality of the femme fatale once the facade is removed. It's a clash between fantasy and reality. The protagonist is then ripped from his moment of admiration for the painting and becomes involved in the quintessential noir plot of murder and blackmail as she pulled him in with her quote-unquote
siren call of adventure.
This shot represents the dichotomy that exists within the character of the femme fatale, and the disillusionment that occurs within the male protagonist once he sees the reality of her character, a trope commonly seen in the noir genre as it's representative of a post-war society's fear of what could become of women's newfound independence, and a mistrust in what female agency could bring about now that women were breaking out of their previous reliance and submission towards men. This shattering of society's view of women in post-war America is further represented in the film The Lady from Shanghai, as the same theme of disillusionment is symbolized through the cinematography at the end of the film. During a close-up shot on the femme fatale's face, the anti-hero realizes that she's killed a man, a crime he gets blamed for. Upon being exposed, however, Elsa's face remains a cold and controlled gaze, completely unfazed by Michael's realization that has brought about the classic moment of noir disillusionment. Our anti-hero is then taken to a fun house, and the femme fatale enters and tells her side of the story standing in a room of mirrors. She illuminates the different sides of her that she hid from Michael through seduction and manipulation, while the shot symbolizes the femme fatale's literal and figurative many faces. The setting of this revealing scene is additionally symbolic of the femme fatale trope, as fun houses are places in which one is meant to suspend their belief of the world, representing the dismantling of the anti-hero's reality that takes place once the femme fatale's front is removed. Then as gunshots go off in a moment of climax, the femme fatale's face staring into a mirror is shattered, symbolizing the shattering of her facade through the anti-hero's revelation and her confession of her true intentions, thus providing a cinematic representation of a post-war nation's disillusionment regarding women's new place in society, and consequential feelings of mistrust in them as they came into a sense of agency, opposing patriarchal standards and conventional domesticity that was translated into such acts of sexual deviancy, deception, and criminality. It's as if the femme fatale is staring down the audience and forcing them to face the death of female submission that she represents in relation to a post-war cultural reconfiguration. Through the close-ups on these femme fatales, we get clear representations of the immorality within them once the illusion of allure is removed. Their facial expressions reveal cracks in their facade and their archetypal innermost drive for all of their desires, criminal and/or material, to be fulfilled through the destruction of the men in their lives and the power that they've been deprived of due to playing into conventionally domestic and submissive roles in society. They smoke, they drink, they flaunt their sexuality, chase the material, and engage in the criminal. Their place in the noir genre is in essence a cinematic reconfiguration of womanhood, symbolic of the cultural one taking place in the country at the time, and their actions leading not only to the downfall of the men in the films alongside them, but an oppressive patriarchal society where the very notion of women having such power and freedom can only lead to perversion, lawlessness, and overall villainy. In the words of Elizabeth Bronfen, after all, the femme fatale successfully undermines the hegemonic morality of family values prevalent in the post-war period, so that even though she is punished in the end, her transgressions against masculine authority, killing her husband, cheating the insurance company, bringing about the demise of her disloyal lover, is what tarries in our memory.